Kia ora koutou, ko Gillian Bly toka wingoa, ko Tumu Matua o Waiora Aotearoa. Welcome everybody, my name is Gillian Blythe, I'm the Chief Executive at Water New Zealand. I thought I'd perhaps start with a karakia. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia te ai, timori tū, timori ora, ki te katoa, humie, huie, tahikie. So thank you for joining us. I'm really delighted to be here joining you. We've got a number of presentations from 5 of our water engineers across the sector, but I thought I would first start with an introduction to Water New Zealand. We are an industry association. We've been going about 65 years. We've got just under 3,000 members. If we go to the next slide, Bernie. What I tend to say to people who are interested in Water New Zealand, the best way to think about us is we're all about water. So in terms of our 5 strategic pillars, they're all around the letters that form the word water. In terms of the Y is why, which is our Te Ao Māori strategy, A being about advice, technical advice, T being about workforce training, E about events, and R about relationships. So the next couple of slides, I'll just give you a bit of an indication. But before I go, if I can just say, at its heart, what we are all about is ka ora te wai, ka ora te whenua, ka ora ngā tangata. If the water is healthy, the land is healthy, and the people are healthy. So if we go to the next slide, I just thought I would give you an indication about the types of special interest groups that you could join if you were interested in being a member of Water New Zealand. So we have a modelling group. I'll just make sure I can see all the slides, which is all around the promotion and support of best practice in water modelling, education, events and guidelines. So they had a regional meeting in Auckland last week. There was a symposium that takes place in March each year. And certainly having taken part in the symposiums over the last couple of years, there's some fascinating conversations. There's also a water efficiency and conservation network, which is all about ultimately getting to a point when we are improving our water use and the efficiency and valuing water. There's a stormwater group, which is very much focused on definition and promotion of best industry practice and the management of stormwater across the motu. They have a large conference every year in May. Next year's one is going to be in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland. They are also very much thinking about policy and education and so forth. There's also a backflow group, which is the best way of describing this for those people who are not familiar with backflow. I describe it as plumbing for the network. It's the bits that keep the good stuff and the bad stuff apart and make sure there aren't potential contamination events. In terms of the next slide, gives you an indication of a few more of our groups. Bernie, oh great, that's perfect. On-site wastewater management systems. Not everybody is on reticulated networks, so this group is thinking around the right way to make sure that the environment is protected and that the systems are appropriate. Then there's a climate change group, which is very much about trying to provide leadership to the sector around how do you limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. They released a number of, there was a Navigating to Net Zero document that they produced last year, which I certainly commend you to have a look at. Then there's a smart water infrastructure group, which is very much thinking about how can you, what's the right form of digital and smart water initiatives that you should be adopting. There's a young water professionals group, which is around ultimately the exchange of interests and ideas. And there are branches across Wellington, Christchurch, Auckland, and Bay of Plenty. And so encourage you to investigate those. If we just go to the next slide. In terms of the Te Ao Māori, the why strategy and the training, just very much about trying to support the sector in terms of understanding the cultural significance and importance of why, importance of water. And then in terms of things like training around introductions to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, backflow, small waters. These are online badges that you can do. There's some great videos from some of our subject matter experts across the sector. I really encourage you to investigate doing those sorts of training. We're also looking at trying to ensure that the broader strategy for the sector is appropriate in terms of encouraging people to join. Then if we just go to the next slide. In terms of the e-events, we've got a major water conference that's coming up in Otatahi, Christchurch in almost 10 days. That is, I think, one of the largest business conference expo events in the country. So I encourage you to investigate the program. Then, as I mentioned, there's a stormwater conference, there's a modelling one, there's also a backflow one, as well as having multiple webinars and so forth, and regional meetings during the course of the year. So that gives you a bit of a snapshot. And obviously, in terms of, the R for relationships, this is what this sort of event is about. It's about encouraging conversations and encouraging interactions with people, whether you're in the Water New Zealand or part of the sector, or if you're in government. It's around that encouraging and ensuring we can get to a situation when we can deliver ka ora te wai, ka ora te whenua, ka ora na tangata, that the water is healthy, the land is healthy, and the people are healthy. So I think there's enough from me, and if we can then flick to the next slide, and I can hand over to Katie Potts from GHD. Welcome, Katie, and the floor is all yours.
Great, thanks, Gillian. Hi everyone, welcome to my day in the life as a water engineer. My name is Katie Potts, as Gillian said. I'm a graduate at GHD based here in the Tauranga office. I work in both the water and energy sectors as a process engineering graduate. I've been here for almost 2 years and I'm finishing the grad program next month. Next slide, please, Bernie. So in 2020, I was studying chemical and process engineering at the University of Canterbury. It was my final year. So in our final year at UC, we do a group design project and an individual research project. So my group design project was an energy-based project, and we looked into converting municipal solid waste, so household rubbish, into kerosene, jet fuel. So we used gasification, Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, hydrocracking, and fractional distillation. And then my individual research project was a water-based project looking into the Photo-Fenton reaction, which is a type of tertiary wastewater treatment to degrade organic pollutants such as dyes used in textile industry. Also in 2020, as you'll know, is when COVID hit. So it made it quite hard for us to get into the labs to actually do our projects. It also made it really hard to find a job. Lots of employers that would normally take us on, our chemical and process engineering graduates, they were no longer hiring grads. They were laying off their own staff already. So yeah, it made it really difficult for our class to find a job that year. But I did manage to get one here at GHD, and I was really, really grateful for that. Although ever since taking on this job, anytime someone asked me where I work and I say GHD, they think I work for the hair straighteners, which is not the case. I actually, if you go to the next slide, Bernie, I can show you what I actually do. So as a chemical and process engineering grad, I was more interested in the treatment side of water. So I mostly work in water treatment, wastewater treatment, and industrial wastewater treatment. So looking at ways to reduce the pollutants and fat, oil and grease coming from these industrial plants such as meatworks and other factories. I've also done some other water work, more civil-based sort of work, such as pump station design, stormwater floodplain assessments, drainage tests, and I've also done some mine water modelling, which is not something I would have ever thought I would do. I don't think of myself as a stereotypical modeler, water modeler kind of person, and I was a bit nervous when I first got asked to work on it. I was like, oh, don't really know anything about that, not sure if I'll be any good, but I say yes to everything. So of course I said yes, and I'm really glad that I did, because it's actually one of my favorite projects at the moment. It's so interesting to learn about. I've gained all these new skills, and it just gives that variety to my day, doing modeling, calculations, report writing, site visits, a bit of everything. Yeah, it's been really great. So next slide, please, Benny. Yeah, so as I said, I'm not just water, I do a bit of other engineering as well. So When I first started at GHD last year, there's this thing we have called Coffee Roulette. It's quite random, but it's a great way to meet more people. You sign up and you're randomly matched with someone else within the New Zealand GHD business. Every fortnight you catch up for half an hour with someone new and get to chat, just like general chit chat, learn about what kind of projects they're working on and what kind of projects you're working on. And it's a great way to meet new people across the entire business that I would not normally work with, and transport and structures, advisory, all the different sectors. So that was really cool. And that's how I kind of learnt more about GHD's Future Energy campaign. When I first heard about it, I was really interested because I'm in the water team and I love the water work, but I had also minored in renewable energy at UC. So I was really keen to use those skills that I had learned at university and hopefully apply them to some real life projects. So I kind of, through these coffee roulette chats, kind of started saying I'm kind of keen to do some energy too. I know it's a bit of a no-go because I'm in the water team, but what do you have? And I managed to work on this really cool waste to energy research project in the Pacific Islands, and then working with these new people in different parts of the business. I then got to work on some other Pacific Island projects. Worked in Papua New Guinea on this electrification project, doing some solar projects there, which then led to some more solar work here in New Zealand, and so on. So I've done some international projects, bit of water, bit of energy, and then I kind of became known as the water and energy grad in New Zealand. So I built this reputation for myself. And if you go to the next slide, please, Bernie. So as the water and energy grad in New Zealand, I was then asked to do some research looking into the different types of hydrogen production processes and the water that's required. It's a bit of both in each, water and energy. So that was really great, and I ended up writing 2 papers with a colleague in Brisbane into the water required and the different types of water sources used in hydrogen production. And it's been such a whirlwind experience. I ended up going to both Brisbane and Sydney earlier this year to present at Ozwater and the Australia New Zealand Young Water Professional Conference. Both such scary experiences, especially Ozwater. I'd never actually been to a conference before, let alone presenting solo at one. It was quite scary being in front of over 100 very technical, far more capable people than myself, doing a technical presentation, but it was the best experience so far out of my comfort zone. But never say no, always say yes. And it's good to get out of your comfort zone and try new things. I love going to those conferences. I think conferences are so much fun. You meet so many amazing people. You learn so much. There's so many different types of presentations, so many topics, so many workshops, and just have the best time. So since starting that research last year, I have now written 4 papers, including those 2. And then we also wrote one recently specifically to Tasmania, like looking to different siting options for hydrogen plants and different water sources there. And we also wrote one for the International Water Association conference, which my colleagues presented last month in Denmark. Next slide, please, Bernie. So I just want to reiterate something that's been a really important part of my career journey so far is just simply networking. I am quite extroverted and I love meeting new people and having new experiences. Networking for me has really opened up my career options. Just had so many different types of projects and all this cool work, and it's been really fun, especially starting as a water grad from chemical and process engineering. I didn't really know any Cape grads that worked in water, and I was like, oh, don't want to just be doing civil water work. It's not really there's anything wrong with it. It's just not my background, and I wanted to kind of use the skills I had just learned at university. So never really thought I would be working on these green hydrogen projects, doing these mass balances for calculating seawater required and doing desalination PFDs. It's been really great to be able to do a bit of both civil and process. So networking's kind of given me all these opportunities and allowed me to get well outside my comfort zone, probably more than I would have liked, but it's been for the best. Also had some travel opportunities. Got that cliche photo of the iceberg pools in Sydney. That was my first time in Sydney, which has been really great, especially since COVID a couple of years ago. So yeah, this is just a summary of my career so far. Everyone's career path is different. There's so many different paths that you can take, especially in water. I personally am interested in the nexus between both the water and energy sectors, so I hope to keep working in this space. And thank you for listening. Back to you, Gillian.
Thank you, Katie. As someone who came from the electricity sector, I totally share your interest in the both the energy and water nexus. I think one of the questions, and maybe we can get to it later on, is around opportunity for more floating solar arrays. So hold that thought.
Yeah.
So if I can now turn to Dominique Thorand from Apex Water. Welcome, and the floor is yours, Dominique.
Thank you very much, Gillian. I appreciate the introduction. How can I follow this great, exciting presentation? Okay, let's go to the first slide. Thank you, Bernie. The first thing I'd like to say that water is the source of all life, and that's what fascinated me about going into this particular sector. For example, in Elizabethan times, young schoolboys, they used to drink a pint of beer with their breakfast before going to school, because the water was just so filthy that it was actually safer to drink beer rather than water. And we've come such a long way. And what we've already seen earlier, there's such exciting new technology available. So to be part of that journey, to deliver safe drinking water to our communities, that's one of the things that really excited me to be in the water sector. The other thing that I particularly enjoy is the variety of work that we do. There's lots of technical know-how available with improvements happening all the time, and we get to test and implement those things. The other thing that I share with Katie is that I also enjoy the mentorship and the discussions between people here all over the water industry business. So if we can go to the next slide, I can share with you that even as a child, I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, I somehow worried about the rust that was on these water pipes sometimes. And that sort of fascination with the infrastructure has never quite left me. And I'm still in various projects involved with water today. I studied chemical engineering. I did a BSc chemical engineering, and then I did a master's in mineral processing and specifically corrosion protection, looking at stainless steels. And that has also led me through a large amount of travel in the USA, in the UK, Italy. I presented in Pisa in one of the conferences. So I think we all share similar experiences throughout our careers and a whole bunch of projects up in Africa. And today I'd like to share some of my project examples with you. So if we can go to the next slide. I'd like to share with you one of the coolest jobs I ever had was to design the gold and silver refineries at the National Mint in Johannesburg in South Africa. So I co-designed the gold plant, but I solely designed the silver refining plant. So that's from concept design all the way to 99.999% pure silver. So there's a lot of water that's involved in these processes, of course, and specifically the quality of water was important in these processes, from the dissolution of chemicals in the electrorefining cells, for example. So you can see here how the silver grows these dendritic forms in the electrorefining bath. On the top right, I don't know if you can see my cursor, and how we can get the process then to be pure silver or gold bullion. So, and there's a lot of wastewater that's being generated at the same time that needs to be looked after. So my speciality originally was more in the processing side of various industrial things, but always looking at various amounts of water. And that would sort of lead me through this path that I sort of started to enjoy going into the water treatment a lot more than staying with pure mineral processing. If we go to the next slide, another really cool project that I did, and that actually went really well, but looking back on it now, I'm not particularly proud of, was a copper refinery that we built in Papua New Guinea. It was a pristine environment. You can actually see a photo here of the buzz bars, you know, that copper electroplating methodology. Again, we used an enormous amount of water from the crushing of the ore and rock to the continued processing, and then up to having RO quality water at the final refining stages. But we used so much water in that process that an entire valley in the Papua New Guinea Highlands was actually flooded with our wastewater, without really understanding the consequences that that had. So you get to do all sorts of different things, and you understand in your career what impacts you have and how you can possibly make more of a difference. And that's why one of the reasons I went more into water and the conservation and the treatment of water. And if we go to the next slide, I show you my most recent project is the water treatment plant in Motueka. That's for approximately 3,500 households. Not all of them are connected at this stage. That consisted of 2 bores, microfill cartridge filtration, UV and chlorine gas disinfection. So a typical water treatment plant. But again, I was involved from the beginning, looking at the bore water analysis, being able to design that process of what was required, looking at then the various design processes, the HAZOP meetings, construction, because I was the project manager on the site, but having a good chemical engineering background, I was able to do most of the design things myself. I did all the procurement for the project, so I was really involved in every detail of it, and that's what I particularly enjoy. One of the other things I really enjoy is the communication that I have on an everyday basis. So I can communicate with stakeholders. Some of them don't understand much technical aspects at all. And then again, with peers during the design reviews and facing difficult technical decision making. So I enjoy that variety in the discussions we have as well, all in an effort to try to minimize the risk that we have in our drinking water quality. If we go to the next slide, I show you some of the variety that we have. So I just picked a couple of things in a typical day, the various things that I could potentially be doing during the various phases of the project. So for example, during the design phase, the procurement, construction, commissioning, or then when we're in between projects. So the design is probably one of the most interesting things for this water engineering group. So in the morning, we could be looking at selecting different chlorine disinfection systems. Do we choose chlorine gas versus hypochlorite versus generating chlorine gas on site from a salt, for example? So trading off what would be important to the client at that point in terms of, or what would be important to the community, the footprint required, the utility requirements, what do we have available? How much does it cost? Those kind of things. And perhaps later on, somebody gives you a call and now you have to switch from chlorine to particulate matter removal. So you look at filtration suppliers and verify what they have offered you against the specifications of flow rate or the ability to remove that particulate matter at various process conditions. The footprint again, pressure drop across the equipment, how it connects to other equipment, the materials of constructions, are they suitable for the environment? How easy is it to maintain? So there's constantly something different to have a look at. And at the end of the day, you might get into a design review of bringing together the things that you've had a look at during the day. Often our GM and our lead designers, we would do that at the end of the day, looking at the 3D models or looking at P&IDs and PFDs to really understand what the consequences are of what the decisions that we've made throughout the day and how that impacts on functional descriptions of the plant. Perhaps we need to update our drawings or go back to suppliers, those kind of things. So it's always very exciting times. During the construction phase, I might have completely different types of problems to solve. So for example, the rainwater tank on site might not be exactly what was designed for, was allowed for, and the site conditions are a little bit different. So we have a look at how that can be, those changes can be minimized. And of course, then during commissioning, we bring all those things together from the design phase and construction phase, and we're doing our testing of what's now against the performance criteria. So we might have the UV reactor representatives of those suppliers on site to validate the various parameters if they've been met, or we might have the other suppliers from the filtration equipment that we specified during the design phase to see how much particulate matter was really removed, taking lab samples, verifying that against instrumentation that we have on site. So throughout the process, there's always lots to consider. And if we go to the next slide, if you then have any further questions, maybe we can answer those at the end of the presentation. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Thank you, Dominique. That was absolutely fascinating. I think one of the things that I love about being involved in an association like Water New Zealand is that you get exposure to all of these different things that are happening. And it opens your eyes to where water is being used in a way that, you know, you would never, well, unless you stop to think, which most of us in our busy lives don't, it's really hard to appreciate it all. So thank you. Our next speaker is Hamish Smith from Greater Wellington Regional Council. So over to you, Hamish.
Kia ora, can you hear me? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
We can hear you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Hamish. I'm a senior engineer at Greater Wellington Regional Council, also known as Te Pane Matua Tile. But for this presentation, I'll go with GW. So today, I'll give a quick lightning overview of my background, the sort of things I do day to day, cover some of my work that I'm finding most engaging at the moment, and together with the rest of the presenters, we're facing one in particular existential question. So just on my title slide here, we're looking at one of Wellington's beautiful rivers, but we need to remember that so much of the, of the natural beauty in our country comes with hazards, and my work revolves around how we live with floods and rivers. Next slide, please. So first things first, what is Greater Wellington and what is a regional council? I get this question quite a lot, so I thought I'd tackle it quickly. So regional council kind of includes, or Greater Wellington includes the territory at the lower end of the North Island, and includes Wellington City, but also Porirua, Kapiti Coast, and Hutt Valley, and over the other side of the Tararuas, where it's about to snow, I believe, the Wairarapa as well. And together with our mana whenua partners, we oversee things like biosecurity, emergency management, environmental natural resource management, flood protection, where I work, harbours, land management, parks, pollution control, regional transport, and bulk water supply, which Wellington Water does on our behalf. So the Regional Council does a lot of things, but my work revolves around managing flood hazard, primarily on the major waterways, but we also provide a lot of strategic advice to those city councils you can see there, and we work very closely with civil defence and flood emergency management. So next slide, please. So in writing this presentation, we all had to confront this existential question, who are we? I'll tell you a little bit about the sort of things I've done in my career, and I'll let you look at a picture taken of me recently on my holiday in Canada that perhaps speaks to more who I am, and you can make your own judgments on that. And sometimes something random in the presentation can make it more memorable, so there you go. So I've moved around in my career quite a bit, but I spent most of my life in Wellington. I grew up here, and I studied in Christchurch, doing a Bachelor of Natural Resources Engineering. I worked in Timaru for a stretch. So Katie, I know your pain. I worked for the hair straightener, not hair straightener company, GHD as well. And then I did a stint at KiwiRail based in Wellington, but working all over the country, traveling around the railway network, looking after their river and coastal protection. And now eventually found myself in my first stint in local government. So I've always enjoyed working in hydrology and hydraulics. I love working with maps and GIS. I love improving processes. I love using new technology. I hate public speaking, but just like Dominique mentioned, sometimes it's good to do something that you don't love. I think that's it on this slide. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I do day to day, and then I'll dive into one of my projects. So day to day, I'm providing sort of strategic and expert advice to the regional policy team, district council policy teams. I'm helping decide where flood risk management expenditure is targeted around the region, and I'm also helping my team with their digital strategy. So I'm getting involved in things like flood hazard mapping, mapping what areas are most likely to flood. I'm getting involved in hydraulic design, reviewing resource consents and designs. I manage projects, I oversee construction, and something that's a little bit newer to me in my role in local government is I'm getting involved in emergency management. So our team has a role in flood response and emergency management, and that's the area that my project is surrounding. So I'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk about my flood forecasting project. I've been managing this project for a little while at Greater Wellington, and what we're trying to deliver is a new flood forecast and warning system. So we've recently spent a lot of effort updating all of our flood response procedures, what we do in response to a flood event, and we've trained and exercised our staff. So we know what to do when it floods, but increased lead times for flood response are directly related to the success. So every hour and minute can really count in emergency management. So to get that increased lead time, we're building this new flood forecast platform, and it can bring in all kinds of different data from the hydrological telemetry network, our rainfall gauges and river gauges, the weather models from the Met Service, combine that and produce some flood forecast models that we can use to support our decision making. Next slide, please. So just a bit of flood forecasting and early warning 101. So we've got our measurements which come in. So this is our rainfall and river level loggers, and we combine them with our knowledge of our assets, like our stop banks or levees, our floodgates, anything we know about them. Are they damaged or are they in good condition? And we can use that information to issue warnings. So I'll get a click. There we go. Just talking about that lead time, that's where our flood forecast system comes into play. This is giving us some additional information and additional lead time that we can use to provide those warnings to our partners, to the public, with that increased lead time, and some information about the confidence of our forecasts. So my project is looking at this. Next slide, please. Just click, click, click. Next slide. So for flood forecasting, we're taking those observations, and then we're combining it in the model. So we know what's happening in the past, and then we're trying to predict something in the future. And so I'll click through to the next slide. It's a couple of images that pop up here. Sorry, I borrowed these slides from another presentation. And at Greater Wellington, the software platform we're choosing to set up is called Delft Fuse. It's software that comes from the Netherlands. So Delft is a town in the Netherlands, and Fuse means Flood Early Warning System. And so to do this, there's been lots of different people that I've needed to work with, which is fun and exciting and frustrating. So I've really done a lot of work with the ICT team to get them on board and help us build out the system. And what was key about this was we wanted to really build the capability to maintain and improve the system in-house. And we wanted to do it so we weren't reliant on a single supplier or external person that had all the knowledge about it. It needed to be easy to maintain, reliable, and easy to expand. So the system's being set up on the cloud, and we're all taking advantage of some new meteorological forecasting outputs from the Met Service. And these are able to use observations like rain radar to create the meteorological model forecasts in the near term. And these are really useful for providing flood forecasting in the smaller catchments we have in New Zealand that respond really fast. And so the big thing about this project is it's a bit of a long game. So flood forecast models will take time to improve. So it's all about building a new capability in the council. Next slide, please. And I suppose what's interesting sort of about these projects to me is that sort of I've found my way from sort of, you know, engineering, getting involved in building physical things like stock banks, but we know in the face of climate change impacts, we can't build our way out of the danger posed by natural hazards. So getting involved in building resilience through preparing for emergencies is a really important step I think we need to take. And next slide, please. And this will just be my last few closing comments. And so, you know, with that realization, we need to raise our game in flood forecasting. And, you know, the UN Secretary General has pointed this out as how important it is and the potential of it to save lives. And so it feels really good to be doing something in the face of a challenge that's massive, and to be, you know, proactive about it, preparing for these disasters. So yeah, next 5 years, there's lots of work to do, and there's going to be lots of different skills needed from engineers and working with all kinds of different scientists and geographers and communication experts. So thanks for listening to me. And one final message from a local government person, remember to get your votes in. Cheers.
Thank you, Hamish. I can reassure you that I posted my vote on Monday. So it's a good advice. Look, I think the early warning systems, I totally agree, the real need to, the more we can get information out there and provide you know, information that can help avoid you know, loss of life or loss of productive capability is so important. So thank you. I'm now going to introduce Jess Hamilton, who's with Jacobs. Jess, over to yourself.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gillian. And yeah, thanks, Katie, Dominic and Hamish. It's one of the things that I guess is still so excited about our career in this industry. Even when we come along to these sorts of talks, you get to learn a whole lot of new things and see how many other things there are out there. So I'm Jess Hamilton, so senior water engineer based in Christchurch, work for Jacobs, and I've been there for about 5 years now. So went through University of Canterbury and did civil engineering there, but was always, since I'd started to want to become a civil engineer, I was always wanting to head in the direction of water. So I might start with a bit of a brief introduction of myself through my PPR. So kia ora tātou, ko tahuna, ko tahua te maunga, ko Hokitika te awa, no Hokitika aho, ko Hamilton, tōku whānau, ko Jess, tōku ingoa. And so I guess really this, for me, that picture on the right there, I'm from Hokitika, so grew up on the west coast of New Zealand, so no stranger to a little bit of water. And so I guess this was for me where it all started, a bit of an interest or a bit of a passion around water in general and understanding how precious and how important this resource is in our lives. And so, yeah, I guess this is where the excitement all started. And what I wanted to do as part of this talk really is just talk through what a typical day in my life as a water engineer looks like at the moment. So if we could jump on to the next slide. Perfect. So I've sort of found my passion in the last few years sits within the drinking water realm of water engineering. And the reasons, I guess, behind this are drinking water. We all need to drink water. I think it's something that, so I feel like through this work is something that I actually get to have a real impact or a meaningful impact that I think that's awesome. Hopefully today we brought some safer water to communities. And so at the moment, for the last few years, really, I've been working on doing a lot of work in the Selwyn district around upgrading their drinking water treatment infrastructure. And again, like Dominic was saying with a lot of her projects, so starting right back at that concept phase. So looking at, first of all, basically what's our problem and what might the solution look like, and what are some of the options to working towards that. So that's starting when you're looking at all of that water quality data. What are the standards require? What's suitable on site? How do you work within the budget constraints? How do you look to make sure that what you're designing for now is also hopefully appropriate for what you're needing in the future? So basically this starts with all of that thinking, working through with the client what works best for them, what's their long-term strategy, that kind of thing. And so we pull this all together into designs. The awesome thing now is we often build these into a 3D model, which is quite cool. So that's really helpful, especially when you're working through the sort of safety and design and hazard and operability studies, to looking at, is stuff at the right height for an operator? So you can put a person into that treatment plant in the model, walk them around, see sort of, is that sitting at their hip or their waist or at shoulder height? Are they going to be able to open the units, take things out, that sort of thing? So in the Selwyn district, typically it is bore, so often deep bore water, and then we put that through, depending on the turbidity, if there is any sand coming up, potentially a cartridge filter, and then through a UV unit. And then we've just been moving recently into putting some chlorine in, or the ability to chlorinate. So yeah, that's kind of the design phase. And then so I was part of that. We did that for 12 water treatment plants, so work through the design. And then if you jump onto the next slide, please, Bernie. So then what we do, so we've got the design, and then the next part really is around that construction and commissioning. So taking what you've designed basically off a piece of paper and into reality. And so this is something that I really enjoy, and you learn and absolutely loads from this kind of thing. And it is pretty exciting when you see something that's on a flat A3 piece of paper actually turn into some pretty stainless steel and lots of valves and that sort of thing. And so I've been lucky enough at the moment, I'm more sitting in this construction commissioning phase. And so as part of my role for Jacob, so we did the design, and then we've also had some responsibility around that construction supervision side of things. So you can see there on the left, that's around sort of programming activities. So we're rolling this out as a program of work. So working on sort of at the moment 23 treatment plants relatively simultaneously rolling out the upgrades. So that's aligning. So my role at the moment is currently Capital Works project manager on behalf of Selwyn. So that's aligning with the main contractor, the subcontractors. So your mechanical subbies, your electrical subcontractors, pulling all of that, the client, what they want, all into one space, and making sure, first of all, how are we going to deliver it, and then is each party putting in and getting out what they want from that. So yeah, there's a picture of me standing in the Taitapu water treatment plant as it's under construction, looking very excited because this was the first UV I got to see installed. So yeah, thoroughly enjoying that. The next part of that really is working through. So we build it all, but then it's also the commissioning. And I have to say, this is probably the part which I get the most excited about. It's when you really get to basically, you push the on button, you do a whole lot of testing first and whatnot, obviously, but it's pushing the on button and seeing, does my design work? Has it been built as it was supposed to? Is the water going to pass through the treatment plant and come out the other end safe and within the parameters that you're hoping for? You also get to do a whole lot of often troubleshooting in this phase. So random sort of quirks popping up on site. I was just looking at one today, actually. That's why I've still got my raincoat on, rushing back from there. So we had a pipe, there was just a tiny small gap in one of the dosing pumps, and so we were getting an airlock. So we were wondering why we weren't for some reason getting chlorine going in when everything's telling you that there should be. So that was working through kind of like, what are all the different scenarios that might lead to that, and slowly honing in on what the actual issue was. So that sort of thing, I guess it's that problem solving, all the theory at the start and the numbers, and then also putting those into practicality and seeing how they actually unfold, which is fantastic. And then there's the final product. So this is Taitapu, and I guess this is kind of where it gets quite exciting and where you get to see a bit of the difference that you've made, really. So we've got a before and an after shot there. So it was just used to be bore straight to network, and then through part of these upgrade processes, we've put in UV treatment and a whole lot of online monitoring of turbidity, UVT, that sort of thing. So we've got a much clearer idea of what's going on with the water quality, and we've also put some chlorine dosing in there too. So yeah, I guess that's what keeps me excited. I love working through all the different parts on site as the water engineer. Really, you get to look at their work with, so you're working with, so I'm the civil engineer obviously, but I'm working with mechanical engineers, structural engineers, electrical engineers, process engineers to sort of pull all of these together, as well as the construction team. And so that's kind of a day in my life at the moment, is a lot of time on site, doing that construction supervision and the commissioning, and then feeling excited and nervous as we switch it on and hoping it all goes to plan. And so another thing I wanted to touch on that I think is really cool is engineering in general, and water engineering especially. It's so much more. There's so many facets to it, like Katie was talking about the conference side of things. So there's business development and sales. So part of it is forming those relationships with your clients. So really getting out there, meeting people, figuring out what their issues are, how you might be able to help, and then delivering on that and forming sort of that trusting relationship so you can keep continuing to do work. There's lots of opportunities in terms of leadership. So whether it's leading people teams or whether it's through project leadership, so in the design management space or the project management space. And so this is awesome because you get to have the softer side of things as well. So yeah, there's writing conference papers, attending conferences, which are always fantastic. I'm looking forward to the water conference, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. That's always a fantastic chance to catch up with everyone, and a good motivation to get a paper written. I also sit as a member of the Water New Zealand conference technical committee, so help with the marking of papers and whatnot for that. And this year and last year, I've actually been really lucky to help teach a final year civil paper at university. And so as part of this is working through a water supply design project, which is awesome. So on a finishing note, I guess really I would just say, come and join us. We need more people in the water industry. It's a great place to work. If you ever want to reach out, yeah, more than happy for anyone to contact me. If you've got any questions about water engineering or want some mentoring or some inspiration or whatnot, I think our industry really is all about connecting with each other and building those relationships.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jess. Great to hear all of your different stories. I'm going to ask Natasha Neve to speak next. Natasha is with Becca. Whilst she is speaking, if you've got questions that you would like to ask, don't forget to put them into the Q&A function. I'm conscious that we might run out of time, but as Jess has already said, I'm sure you can reach out to any one of us to ask a question to do that. But over to Natasha. Thank you.
Kia ora, Gillian. And yes, I reiterate that. Definitely happy to answer any questions offline as well. It's been really great hearing from the other speakers. I'm also feeling excited and inspired, even though I'm already in the industry. So kia ora koutou, ko Natasha Neve aho, ko kai pukaha aho. I am an engineer. Next slide. So yeah, I've worked on lots of projects in the first 5 years of my career with Becca. I've worked on really large ones. I've worked on really small ones. I've worked on a bit of wastewater, a bit of drinking water. I've worked throughout the different stages of design, feasibility studies, right through to detailed design and construction phase. And this is definitely one of the benefits of working for a consultancy, something that I really enjoy about my work. And, as you've heard, the water industry itself is so diverse in terms of the different bits you can get into. So I want to share three projects I've enjoyed in my career so far to give you a snapshot into what my day is like. in reality, I could be working on like 8 projects at a time. I'm working on about 8 right now. So my day can change quite a bit. I might be getting to visit site in the morning, taking some photos of pipe work, and then I might be doing some equipment sizing calculations on Excel in the afternoon. So it can change quite a bit. And I just want to say from the start that I've never really had a defined plan or a direction for my career. I've tried a lot of things, which is also what some of the other panelists have, some of their experiences as well. And we've all found something that we enjoy, but don't be afraid to just try new things. You know, I've done a bit of job managing, wasn't for me. It turns out I love detailed design. So just give it a go, especially in the early years of your career. So the first project on the next slide, I spent the first 3 years of my career in Becker's Melbourne office. And then I spent about 2 of those 3 years working on this project here, which is the upgrade of the Bonio water recycling plant in Victoria. So Becker, the company I work for, made a joint venture with Suez and John Holland to design, construct and operate this plant for the first few years. I hadn't learnt pretty much anything at uni about wastewater treatment. I just had the foundations of process engineering, but I learnt it all, you know, on the job as I went from my amazing colleagues. And if you can just play the video, please, Bernie. So yeah, this was a huge project, really exciting project. You can see so much was happening. Almost all of the treatment units on site were new or upgraded. This was a really cool opportunity for me to work with heaps of other disciplines, other engineers, structural, electrical engineers, but also directly with operators and with the construction team, making sure our designs are constructible and operable. Some of the specific tasks that I was heavily involved in this project were updating design drawings as the design developed. So for a process engineer, they're piping and instrumentation diagrams. I was also involved in writing control narratives. So these are the documents that define sort of the key elements of a control system. So what conditions would make a pump turn on, at what levels would an alarm go off to notify the operator, that sort of level of detail. And then I was also involved in safety and design processes and HAZOP processes. So these are, you'll definitely be familiar with them if you're already in the industry, but if you're not, they're important steps of the design process to make sure that we are designing things that are safe to construct and to operate, and that they're achieving our goals of treating wastewater or providing safe drinking water. The next project is very different. So this project was to remove sludge from wastewater treatment ponds in the Mackenzie region. I was working on this project earlier in the year. So for a pond-based wastewater treatment system, this process needs to be done every now and then, maybe every 10 years, might be left for 20 years. And during this process, the sludge that has settled in the bottom of the ponds is dredged up. So it's sucked up from the bottom of the ponds. As it's piped out of the ponds, it's dosed with a chemical to help the dewatering process, and it's piped into these bags. You can see the 2 pictures on the right. These bags, the fabric sort of like feels like a trampoline, but more tightly wound, and over time they sit on site for about a year or maybe even longer, and the water seeps out of them, drains back into the pond, and what you're left with is a drier material, sort of like the consistency of soil. So for this project, Becker wrote the contract based on a standard New Zealand contract for these types of projects. And the contract was between Mackenzie District Council, who own the ponds, and the contractor who was undertaking the desludging work. The value of the contract was just under $1 million. So my role on this project was doing contract management. The sorts of tasks I would be doing were going to site and meeting with the client and the contractors, talking about projects, any sort of issues that had cropped up, and resolving them on site. Also things like going through payment claims submitted by the contractor and reviewing them against work as it progressed. And also documenting any important discussions or any changes to scope that came up and making sure that that was all relevant and included in the contract. The next project, the last one, is pretty different again. This one is from earlier this year. I was seconded into Palmerston North City Council. So a secondment is an arrangement where you move into another role temporarily. So although I worked for Beca, I was sitting in Palmerston North City Council and working on their behalf for a few months. So I was sitting in their awesome Three Waters team. It was a really cool experience, very different from the work that I do typically at Beca. So my role here involved pushing forward a bunch of capital projects. For example, just to get quite specific, one of the projects, the pump station on the right, was one of a few pump stations that was identified as needing a capacity upgrade. So I'd go out to site, meet with the operations and maintenance team, talk about things like access requirements, understanding what the electrical capacity is on site, and putting all of the requirements and constraints into a scoping document, which we then passed out to consultants to undertake the design to meet the capacity requirements. And next slide. I just, wanted to, I guess, reiterate what I said at the start, is just to, I love working in the water industry. There's so many different things that you can do. And I think it's just really important to keep trying and finding the thing that you enjoy. There'll definitely be something in the industry that's for you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Perhaps Bernie, if you want to remove the slides. I don't know if there are any questions for our panelists, but hopefully we have in the almost hour, because we are 2 minutes to 6, you've seen 5 very different journeys, but I think all of our speakers are at a point when they are absolutely making a difference for the communities, whether that's someone who's turning on a tap in a regional part of New Zealand, or flushing a toilet somewhere, or dealing with the fact that you are going to with climate change see increased flooding, or the need for how are we going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and what are the opportunities in terms of the energy water nexus. So I certainly feel that the common denominator with all the water professionals that I interact with is that they all want to make a difference. They all want to get to a position when we've got healthy people, which hopefully is achieved with a healthy planet. So if I can just say a huge thank you, and I will reiterate, I'm happy to be contacted. If you want to be involved in Water New Zealand, check us out in terms of our website, waternz.org.nz. Thank you very much, Bernie, for that. And certainly, I'm sure if I'm, could speak for Dominique, for Natasha, for Katie, for Hamish, and for Jess, don't be shy. I think the thing that I learned in my mid-20s was, if you don't put your hand up, you can't get to places. I mean, I probably sound like I come from the UK. I do, and in 1995, I came out to New Zealand because I had the opportunity to respond to an opportunity. And if you don't put your hand up, you can't do it. So perhaps that's the biggest lesson for everybody. So thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our presenters. And I will just say, ka kite anō.